Panzerkampfwagen IV Ausführung J, or Aus J if we're talking in English, also known as the Gerät 550 or Sonderkraftfahrzeug 161-2, was the last variant of the famed Panzer IV. It was produced from January 1944 to the last days of April 1945 in the Nibelungenwerk factory in Sankt Valentin, northern Austria. This variant was characterized by many modifications made to the previous models in order to speed up production and save on valuable raw materials. Welcome to a new Tank Encyclopedia voiced article. I'm your host Stan, and if before this we have done the Panzer IV Aus A, B, C, D and E, we're now going all the way around and doing the Aus J. Don't ask why, but it works like this. If you do like our content, please make sure to check out our website. There's a lot of articles over there that we do not make into video format, so you might enjoy those as well. And if you like our work in general, please do consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. Every little bit helps. With that said, let's get on to the Panzer IV J. The Panzer IV was the only medium tank to remain in production from before World War II until 1945. Its total production number, more than 8,500 vehicles from variant A to variant G, represents 30% of the tanks produced by Germany. At the beginning of the war, the Panzer IV was the most powerful vehicle the Wehrmacht could count on, but it was almost immediately realized that the short-barreled 7.5 cm Kampfwagenkanone 37 L24 were not able to fight against more armored enemy vehicles. However, they were not meant to, as the Panzer IV was designed as a support vehicle for the Panzer III, destroying fortifications and enemy emplacements, not enemy tanks. Small note, it was not meant as an infantry support tank, it was meant as a tank support tank. The concept in German was an escort vehicle, a Begleitwagen. The Panzer IV Aus F2 was introduced in March 1942. Armed with the 7.5 cm KWK-40 L43 with a 3.22 meter long barrel. The new variant proved to be very effective and able to face even the most armored Russian tanks such as the T-34 and KV-1. After the production of only 179 units, the Aus G entered into service 3 months later in June 1942, armed with the same cannon but with a maximum frontal arm of 80mm, with 1,735 being produced until 1943. These two long-barreled variants of the Panzer IV were the most powerful tanks of the Wehrmacht until the introduction of the Tiger I in September of 1942. In April 1943, the production of the Aus H, armed with the longer 7.5 cm KWK-40 L48 cannon with a 3.7 meter long barrel began. This variant entered service in July 1943 and 2,322 were produced until July 1944. The losses suffered by the German armored divisions were considerable by 1942. Fighting against the Red Army, 502 Panzer IVs were lost in 1942 alone. In 1943, 2,352 Panzer IVs were lost. The main companies producing the Panzer IV were Krupp, Vogtländische Maschinenfabrik or VOMAG in Plauen, and Nibelungenwerk. Nibelungenwerk produced 1,378 Panzer IVs in 1943. In May 1943, Adolf Hitler ordered the General Inspecteur der Panzertruppen to increase the production of tanks, increase the repair of damaged armor vehicles at the front and in specialized workshops in Germany, and ordered a substantial reduction in the production of secondary vehicles such as the Berger Panzer and Munition Panzer, which was a very smart idea given that they didn't have enough Berger Panzers as it was. Following Hitler's directives in December 1943, Krupp modified its assembly lines to produce the Sturmgeschütz IV. In the spring of 1944, VOMAG converted its assembly lines to produce the Jagdpanzer IV. Nibelungenwerk remained the only company producing the Panzer IV. There is a disagreement among the secondary literature over the total number of Panzer IV Aus Js produced. According to Peter Chamberlain and Hilary Doyle in Encyclopedia of German World War II Tanks, and Kevin Hjermstad in the Panzerkampfwagen IV medium tank, 1,758 Panzer IV Ausf J tanks were built. In Panzerkampfwagen IV, the backbone of the German armed forces of World War II, David Doyle speculates that as many as 3,000 tanks, with an additional 200 chassis of the Panzer IV Ausf J, were produced. According to Panzer Tracts 4-3, 179 Ausf J tanks were produced by WOMAG. Nibelungenwerk produced 3,433 until March 1945. To these Panzer IVs are added about 260 chassis for vehicles such as the Panzer IV and another 28 Panzer IV Ausf J built immediately after the war under Soviet control. The Panzer IV Ausf J production lasted about 16 months, during which time they received some modifications that sped up production and saved raw materials needed for other purposes. Now, given that some people online keep saying that this was a problem for German panzers, no, it was not. Absolutely everybody did this. Everybody introduced small incremental changes in production in order to speed up or improve certain things. This was not a German thing. It was everybody doing it. The turret of the Panzer IV Ausf J was the same as that of the Ausf H, with a turret ring diameter of 1.6 meters. The only substantial modification was the adoption of the Nachverteidigungswaffe grenade launcher on the right side of the smoke extractor. In vehicles manufactured after May 1944, the Maschinenpistolenstopfen, the gun ports, on the back of the turret and on the side access doors were removed, as were the vision ports. However, this modification was not carried out on all vehicles, as some Ausf J tanks with the pistol ports came off the assembly lines in 1945 because not all the companies that produced the Panzer IV turrets had removed these details. In June 1944, 3 sockets were added on the roof of the turret for the assembly of a 2-ton winch to lift parts of the vehicle or of other vehicles in the vicinity of the Panzer IV for maintenance and replacement. The commander's cupola hatch was replaced from October 1944 with a pivoting hatch very similar to that of the Tiger and Panther. The cover of the smoke extractor was modified after November 1944 to allow a 360-degree use of the Nachverteidigungswaffe. I love saying that. The bracket for the Orterkompass 38 Type 2, a navigation compass mounted when required outside the tank, was welded over the smoke extractor. Inside the vehicle, the steel plates did not allow the compass to find the North Magnetic Pole. The anti-aircraft machine gun support mounted on the commander's cupola was also modified to speed up production and to adapt to the new pivoting hatch. The turret rotation mechanism was equipped with a second reduction gear to allow the crew to manually rotate the turret even on slopes. Yay for them. After January 1945, 3 poison gas detector cards were fixed, 1 on the barrel of the cannon and 2 on the backsides of the turret. These cards measured the pH of the air and notified the crew if poison gas was being used. The crew, as in other versions of the Panzer IV, was composed of 5 men. In the whole, these were the driver and machine gunner / radio operator on the left and right of the transmission respectively. The other 3 members of the crew were placed in the turret. The gunner was on the right of the breech of the cannon, the loader on the left, while the tank commander was in the middle behind the breech. Each of the 5 crew members had a hatch through which they could enter or exit safely, which is an amazing thing that many tanks don't still have. Communication inside the vehicle was via an intercom system connected to the FUG-2 radio. In general, the crews did not appreciate the Panzer IV Ausf J, considering it inferior to the Ausf H because of the numerous measures used to speed up its production, making it less ergonomic for the crew. To give an example, they severely disliked the lack of an electrical system for the turret rotation or the absence of vision ports in the side doors of the turret. The hull was divided into 2 parts, the fighting compartment that included the front and middle parts of the vehicle and, separated by a steel firewall, the engine compartment. The driver had at his disposal a slit with an armored shutter to see the battlefield. To his right he had the transmission, the gear shift, and above the transmission the dashboard. In front of him he had the two driving levers and three pedals, clutch, brake, and accelerator, while in front on the left was the steering brake. Behind him there was an ammunition hold. The machine gunner / radio operator had in front of him a ball mount for an MG34 with a KFZ sight. In front of his legs was the other steering brake. On his right, inside some racks, was the FUG-5 radio, while behind it there were transformers and under his seat an evacuation hatch. The armor of the Ausf J was unchanged compared to the Ausf H. The hull and superstructure maintained a thickness of 80mm at the front, 30mm on the sides, and 20mm on the engine compartment and rear. The turret kept a thickness of 50mm at the front and 30mm on the sides and rear. The gun mantlet was also 50mm thick, while the commander's cupola was 90mm thick. The armor of the hull roof remained 11mm, while the one of the turret was thickened from 16 to 25mm, while the hull floor remained 10mm. Until June 1944, face-hardened armor steel developed by Krupp in 1893 for naval use and used on all German tanks was also used on the Panzer IV Ausf J. During that month, an Allied bombardment seriously damaged Panzerfirma Krupp in Essen, the largest producer of face-hardened armored steel for the Panzer IV. It was therefore chosen by Waffenprüfbeamte 6, the weapons testing authorities, to switch from face-hardened armor to rolled homogeneous armor, which was less resistant but faster to produce, reducing the raw materials used and the time of production. As on the Panzer IV Ausf H, the first Ausf Js were equipped with 8mm thick Schützen mounted on the turret and 5mm thick on the sides of the hull. This spaced armor was introduced in June 1943 to defend the German tanks from Soviet PTRS-41 and PTRD-41 anti-tank rifles. No such thing as defending against heat shells. That was not a thing. Until September 1944, the Panzer IV Ausf J tanks were supplied with Schützen. The armored skirts on the sides of the hull were attached by handles to an iron carrier rail welded to the hull by 4 support brackets. After September 1944, wire mesh skirts were supplied to save on precious steel. This armor, sometimes called Thoma after its developer, the General Inspector der Panzertruppen, Wolfgang Thomale, was fixed by a tubular carrier rail and modified support brackets. These side skirts were produced with 5mm thick welded iron wire with a 15mm distance between the wires. They were 600 kg lighter than the standard Schützen. Around December 1944 and January 1945, the wire mesh skirt panels were applied on the top, between the side skirts and the hull, to prevent anti-tank grenades such as the Soviet RPG-43s or improvised explosive charges from being thrown and adhering to the fenders or the sides of the hull. A Thoma panel was also attached to the back of the turret, attached to the rear toolbox so that if anti-tank grenades were thrown they would bounce and not detonate on the rear sides of the turret. Due to the desperate conditions of the Wehrmacht in the last months of the war, many Panzer IV Ausf Js remained equipped with the old Schützen even in 1945 and did not receive these improvements, or, as was the case for the unluckier guys, they were never added. The new wire mesh skirts introduced for this version received modifications to the supports to be further spaced from the hull. This allowed the wider Ostketten tracks to be mounted. They were 56 cm wide and developed to increase mobility on muddy or snowy terrain, especially on the Eastern Front. The maximum speed of the Panzer IV Ausf J was 38 km per hour. The average speed at which it operated was 25 km on the road, while the off-road speed decreased to 15. On the back of the hull was mounted the muffler. On the first vehicles produced, it was identical to that of the previous models, while from August 1944 onward it was replaced by two Flammatüter, flame suppression exhaust mufflers. The easiest method to identify a Panzer IV Ausf J from a Panzer IV Ausf H is the absence of the rectangular exhaust muffler of the turret rotation engine mounted on the left side of the back of the hull, which is not very useful if you can't see the left side of the back of the hull. The main armament of the Panzer IV Ausf J was the 7.5 cm Kampfwagen Kanone 1940, an L48 gun. The cannon weighed 750 kilograms. The elevation and depression of the cannon were 20 and -10 degrees respectively. The maximum firing range was 7,700 meters. That's not the effective range, that's just how far the shell could go. The operational life was between 5,000 and 7,000 rounds, and the gun could reach a rate of fire of 10 to 15 rounds per minute with a well-trained loader. And well-rested loader, by the way. It was a rather precise cannon capable of hitting targets on the first shot even at 1,000 meter distances. The optical sight used was the high-quality Turmzielfernrohr 5F. It had a magnification of by 2.5, a visibility arc of 25 degrees, and was mounted to the left of the cannon. The gunner could adjust the range by moving an arrow in the optics. The reticle was graduated at intervals of 100 meters up to 2,500 meters for the Panzergranate 39, 1,500 meters for the Panzergranate 40, and 3,300 meters for the Sprenggranate 34. The secondary armament consisted of 2 or 3 1934 Maschinengewehr and a Nachverteidigungswaffe grenade launcher. A machine gun was mounted coaxially positioned to the right of the cannon and shared the same optics. The second one was in the hull in a bowl mount. Its depression and elevation angles were -10 and +20, with 15 degrees of traverse to the right and left. It was fitted with a Kugelzielfernrohr 2 optic. A third machine gun could be mounted in the anti-aircraft support on a rail fixed to the commander's cupola. When available, the Panzer IV Ausf J could have a Nachverteidigungswaffe grenade launcher mounted in the turret. This could fire explosives, smoke, or flare ammunition. All of these rounds were fired from a 360 degrees rotating projector mounted at a fixed 50-degree inclination angle. The Panzer IV Ausf J could carry 86 7.5 cm KWK-40 rounds in total, stowed in 8 different racks. 86 rounds were more than enough by the standards of the time. The problem was that these took a lot of space inside the vehicle. In fact, it should be remembered that the Panzer IV was designed to carry the shorter ammunition of the KWK-37 and not that of the KWK-40. The new cannon rounds had a larger casing and consequently were much more bulky and prone to explode if hit. In the last vehicles produced between February and April 1945, the racks were slightly different, carrying only 80 rounds. Out of 86 rounds, it was recommended to the crew by the instructors to carry Panzergranate 39 and Sprenggranate 34 in equal numbers, and when available some Panzergranate 40 for use against heavily armored targets. This was recommended. What was actually carried depended on what was available and what the mission was. 3,150 rounds for the MG34s were carried. These were the 7.92mm Spitzgeschoss mit Kern, pointed bullet with core, Spitzgeschoss mit Kern Luftspur, pointed bullet with core tracer, belted in 150 round bags. Several types of shells for the Nachverteidigungswaffe could be carried. God, I love saying that. The Schnell-Nebelkerzen 39 quick smoke rounds and Rauchsichtseisen Orange 160 orange smoke. The first were used for concealment, the second for signaling targets for air or artillery attacks. The Luftgeschossen A were illuminating rounds which could be used to illuminate the battlefield during night missions or to call for help. And the Sprenggranatpatrone 326 LP was designed to protect the vehicle from enemy infantry at very close ranges. It was fireable out to a range of up to 10 meters and operated on a 1-second delay. The grenade exploded in a zone 0.5 to 2 meters from the ground with a fragment radius of up to 100 meters, lethal to nearby troops. The Panzer IV Ausf. J entered service with the Wehrmacht in February-March 1944. It was immediately used on the Eastern Front. In June 1944, there should have been 1,502 tanks available, but due to the production delays and losses in combat, there were only 605 Panzer IVs of different models on that front. On April 30, 1944, an Allied bombardment of the gearbox factory in Friedrichshafen slowed down the productivity of many German tank factories as it slowed down deliveries of essential components. Hitler therefore ordered to bring the production priority of the Sturmgeschütz to the same level as that of the Jagdpanzer and to increase the production of fighter planes. The Minister of Armaments and War Production, Albert Speer, noted that the orders for armored vehicles in 1944 amounted to 40,300, but the actual production numbers at the end of the year were only 27,340 vehicles. In July 1944, the 1944-1945 production plan came into force, which provided for the production of 3 types of vehicles: Panzer 38T hull vehicles, 25-ton vehicles, and the Panther Tiger I and Tiger II. In October, Speer proposed to Hitler to remove the 25-ton vehicles, those being the Panzer III, IV, and the self-propelled guns on their hulls, from production in order to focus only on light and heavy vehicles. In addition, he proposed to convert the factories that produce the HL-120 TRM to produce aeronautical engines. On October 17, 1944, an Allied bombardment hit the Nibelungenwerk in Sankt Valentin, stopping production until November 4th.
That's all for this video. Make sure to follow our website, we'll be releasing new articles on the regular. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Reddit, and if you use Discord, there's a link to our community server in the description. Also, likes, comments, and subscriptions on YouTube are greatly appreciated. If you would like to help us continue to develop and expand, also consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be used to help us enhance and design new articles and features for you. Until next time, keep us in your sights.